you should be trying to use the cash flow from your business to generate the future growth rather than kind of upfronting it.
Just adding people doesn't necessarily add profit and revenue.
That big cornerstone office, I think, is one thing. It's just kind of a budget buster.
Okay, so we're paying for this tool. Mm-hmm. How much are we using it?
Whatever you're doing to make the product or deliver the service now with what you have should be paying for that next upgrade. And you should be doing an ROI calculation on why that upgrade matters, how much more money it's going to make you or how much time it's going to save you, and you use the cash flow from the business to help fund that.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Next Gen Strategies podcast. Joining me as always, Mr. Tyler Davis, and we have another one that's just going to be between us today. We're going to go over a lot of different things that are kind of happening right now in the world of business. We always talk about scale on a lot of these episodes in some form or fashion. And today we want to talk a little bit about stretching budgets and scaling smarter, and not necessarily meaning where we always have to really expand and, become these really big businesses, but how do you scale quickly, and how do you scale effectively, and how do you stretch a budget? And so we're going to be talking a lot of different things around budgeting. I'm going to throw some marketing stuff in there as well, things that we can do from an operations standpoint, tool standpoint, and hopefully, from a listener standpoint, you guys can really drive some value out today. And, if there's other things that, like we always say, if there's other things that we forget, or if there's other things and hacks that you have ideas around, let us know. We want to share, and we're always open to feedback. So Tyler, let's get things kicked off here. What is kind of number one on your list of ways to kind of scale effectively?
Yeah, I think there are these sticking points with businesses when they get to a certain size, when they grow, and there can be a lot more bloat in terms of cost at that point, just because you're starting to delegate decisions more. You may not be doing everything with just straight grit, in a really, really tight budget. So there's money around to spend, but what we're talking about here is still kind of operating under that assumption, staying lean in terms of cost. And one area that really stood out to me is this, office space situation, right? Or whatever lease or building that you want to acquire. There's a certain stage of your business when money starts rolling in that you're like, okay, we need more or bigger or better space. And, I think a lot of people think that adds some, it makes their business more legit. I got the big corner office. I got the fancy sign, looks really clean, looks new, looks modern. It's very expensive, and it hangs around forever because that's a straight operating cost that a lot of times, unless you're like a retail establishment, isn't directly involved with, increasing revenue. So I'm not saying that, every business needs to have no office and work remotely, but a lot of them, that can be the case. And then furthermore, a lot of them don't need a huge office, like just a small little HQ headquarters, could easily work, because there's, just as well I do, there is a ton of empty commercial space right now. A lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's one thing where, if you look at most service-based businesses, you can operate very legitimately and grow a very, very large business out of your basement.
Yeah.
Right. Or out of a spare room. Some people like Grant here goes, heck no, I am not working out of my spare room in my house every day, but there are other options, right? Yeah. So you have, just very small little rentals that you could do. There's also the co-working spaces where you can just rent a single room. A lot can be done with a very, very small budget there. But I wanted to give another example too. Like if you're in the trades or you're construction, name off any other type of thing, a lot of those businesses don't need a main office. And if they do want to have a main office, it can be very small because all the people working are on job sites. You might get to a point where you need to be able to store some equipment and things like that, but that can be done in a budget friendly way as well. That big cornerstone office, I think, is one thing. It's just kind of a budget buster.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's a lot of times we go back to the like legit piece of it where some folks are like, well, we want to own everything that we're in, or and in some cases that makes a lot of sense. Or if you're looking to do investments and stuff like that might make a lot of sense. But a lot of times it's just fine to do like a lease and like to what you were saying, like square footage on a place, like it'll look a little bit different, leasing versus owning and what that cost comes back down to. So just a lot of opportunities there as well.
What I like about leasing too is that, if you have a scaling business, that means things could be changing a lot and frequently. So getting a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year lease gives you opportunity to make different decisions at those intervals in time, and you're not pegged down with kind of stuck in one spot. So I don't hate leases for that reason either. And the other thing I just wanted to add here is if you're looking at expanding space or you want something different, the mindset you need to have coming into it is what the ROI is. What's your return on investment on the space? Is it just to kind of stroke your ego and make you feel like, woohoo, I got this real nice building? Or is it there because it's going to allow you to generate more profit for your business?
And really quickly here, and we'll move on to everything too. Like a lot of times that space though, I'll play devil's advocate. If you are investing in a building, or you do have the ability to sublet out space or figure out where there's different tenant availabilities and stuff, like that's part of what I know you help folks with from the CPA standpoint. It's like, okay, how do we maximize the revenue per square foot, and how do we look at what do we need for our operations? And if I was to sublet something to somebody else, or if I was bringing a new tenant in, or what does that look like? And I know you help people kind of model that very, very frequently, both on commercial spaces like for manufacturing and for larger companies, or even on the office space side of things as well.
It's all an ROI thing, whether like you said, you're subletting out or trying to find other revenue opportunities, or you're looking at tax savings or something like that. Like I said, it's just an ROI calculation, and you should keep that in mind when you're looking at space because it's a high ticket item.
Yeah, for sure. So Tyler, that one of the first things, right? So let's not overdo office space if we're trying to be lean. Well, what's another thing that you're seeing some folks doing that are scaling kind of more effectively and smartly here?
Yeah, I think just overall, like the gear or the equipment that your business uses, there's what the accountants call it furniture, fixtures, and equipment, FF&E. You do see at this stage for businesses when they start coming into some cash flow, you definitely start stepping up either the quantity or quality of some of the things you're buying. It's finally an opportunity to get like the nicer thing. The same thing I'm going to say here is you really need to key that into an ROI. I'm not saying to be cheap. If buying, laptops that are $500 more each, gets a better service life out of them and they're faster and you get better productivity, absolutely. But do you need the most elaborate of things? I see this a ton. I think people will chase down like the biggest and nicest piece of equipment because I need this to really be able to do my job well. And that's where the costs really start adding up. And all of a sudden the margins start getting eroded because you were making good money on the margins that were before on maybe more budget equipment. And you step that up. And if you don't raise your prices to come up with that, you're going to have a problem, right? The adage or the example, I like to use is like, you'll see this in the trades a lot, paid off, or even with farmers, that good, trusty old paid off equipment makes you a lot of money because it's paid for and it still works, and then the alternative is the big, bright, new shiny piece of equipment or truck or tools, you can go all kinds of different angles. Like you guys that know tools, Snap-on versus Harbor Freight, right? Well, does a Harbor Freight tool get the job done and not break? Just as good as a Snap-on tool, but for a tenth of the price?
Depends.
Yeah, you will know better than everyone else. But some of this is just like a personality and ego thing. Got to have the best, got to have the nicest. Or it's, for some reason, everybody needs the $75,000 vehicle because they own a business now, Those are the things that I see that really add up and create this big bloat. If you would hustle down on that old equipment and use the profits of that old equipment to help fund the new stuff in a reasonable way, that's how you kind of maintain an even kill non-bloated budget through this growth.
Yeah, for sure. And I think kind of going into the other side of, equipment and gear is tools.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we definitely often see, especially being on the service side of things, is like there are so many tools that are existing out there right now that, are AI driven, or they claim to do everything, or there's always a new and shiny thing. And frankly, it can be really difficult to try to vet the right ones and figure out like what is the one that's going to get the greatest return for what I'm doing. And so I know one of the things that you're seeing, Tyler, is, just starting off with, where are you storing your files, and like what system are you going with between like a Google and a Microsoft and things like that. And making sure that you're maximizing what you buy before you move on to something else. I know you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of thoughts just because I'm guilty of this. Just very guilty. There's a lot of money being made, or a lot of businesses getting created right now on saying, okay, we're going to use ChatGPT-4, and bolt it onto something and say it's AI for accountants or AI for marketers. And that's just its own whole subset of, if you're into the, generative, AI stuff, you could, sky's the limit in different products or tools that are out there. So let's take a step back though and think about the day-to-day things probably every single business should have. And that's going to be your main kind of file storage and word processor and email, application. The big two players are Microsoft and Google. I'm going to go ahead and make a stance on this podcast that you should do Google. I'm a Microsoft person, and I got lured that way just because I've been trained and lived my whole life in Excel, and Google Sheets was quite behind for some time. Now I painstakingly want to make a move to Google, and it's going to be a lot of work. So I think if I had it over again, I would have started with Google.
I've been chipping at them for years as a marketing guy who's always been the Google Mac guy. But anyway, we won't get to Mac PC on this one yet.
But let's just stick there with Google, right? Google has just really made this powerful suite of productivity tools outside of just Gmail, right? So, when you can go sign up for a Google Workspace account for, I think, $15 a user a month, somewhere around that. And it gives you like a terabyte of storage, your Gmail, which you can put your fancy company name domain on. It has your calendar. It has your word processor. It's got Excel. It's got probably another 25 things after that. And one of them is Gemini, which is their version of basically ChatGPT, right? So you could be looking at, okay, we use Google for our email, and you see all these shiny objects around you in terms of tools and productivity hacks and pieces of software. And I think what we're saying in this segment is that if you have a Google account or Google Workspace account, really look in on that basic $15 a month subscription and what it gives you, because you can pull a lot of value out of that, because they have forms and they have automations on the spreadsheets. They have all kinds of different things with their email system and tags and all of that. So if you're looking at trying to, be super productive, and you see these shiny tools that are getting advertised to you, well, you can do this automated this way. Take a look under the hub of that Google Workspace and do a little Googling, because there's a good chance it's going to be able to do it without this big inflated cost. Because what normally happens is they'll say, here's the productivity AI tool for plumbers, and it'll be $1,200 a month. And you might have been able to accomplish all of that under your $15 a month Google subscription. Yeah,
for sure. And I'm going to kind of piggyback on that on some things that I've learned even recently, kind of painstakingly. I'm now finding myself almost on a monthly, definitely quarterly basis, kind of reevaluating, and either myself or even talking to other folks on my team, like, okay, so we're paying for this tool. How much are we using it?
Yeah.
And if the answer is less than like 50%, I'm having a real hard conversation around like, do we need it or do we not need it? And so I think that that's a good thing to do if you're not already doing that. Like, I think increasing the frequency of your tool audits is important, because you can pretty quickly rack up some charges that, you may not be getting that full return for. The other thing that you mentioned was like, there's a lot of tools that get more industry niche. And some of them are really good. Some of them really do add certain value to certain industries, depending on what it is. One of the things that I have noticed is the ones that add the most value were built by people in that industry, specifically for the people in that industry, and they continue to service you past the subscription. I'll give you a great example of, there's one that I'm using on the marketing side of things right now. And, a lot of it is powered by ChatGPT-4, blah, blah, blah. But one of the nice aspects of them, at least to date, has been, they also come with like folks who will help you as like an account manager, and they're not, just selling you a subscription and running away, with your money like some of these other tools are. And I know that there's other ones in other industries as well that, if those tools are really, not just taking, slapping a skin on the ChatGPT side of things, and they really are thoughtful to like helping you become adopted to that tool. I think that makes a huge difference in being able to utilize it and utilizing the correct way versus just buying one and hoping it works.
Yeah, there are platforms that, you'll say we have to have this to run our business. Absolutely understand, and they're expensive. But we're going to get down this kind of road of, in terms of scaling and stretching the budget, like lean operations. And I just want to stay here and think about this before you go start chasing the shiny thing, right? You can do a lot inside that Google Workspace because Gemini's in there, which is a chat feature. Spend some time just asking it what you can do with the platform that exists. What's nice is it's interconnected. Then there are other tools. This is a little deeper, but what's nice about these big open players, right? Like Google's a big player in the space. It's not got walled gardens around it in terms of integrations with other tools. So you can go look at a tool like Zapier, which can be free to little cost, and it can start doing some crazy automations inside that workspace tool, Google Workspace account as well. So like you can really scale up and do some crazy things with just that Google account and Zapier. That's why I just want to keep people focused there, because if you're not leveraging all of that, and I think what you're going to find is sometimes your team or you will tend to come back into that main tool, because as soon as you drop that new side tool that's out here on the side, it's kind of a lot of work to keep people in it. If all the day-to-day is happening inside Gmail or inside Calendar or inside of a spreadsheet, well, if you stay in the ecosystem, like it can be really powerful because the stuff's already there. That's the challenge. I don't know if you have it. I have, is like as soon as you cross over ecosystems, it gets to be a chore. Like the list keeps going on and on about what's got I think we talked about it in the fractional COO episode, like what's the source of truth?
Yep.
So it's just an area that I think I'm super guilty of. And I'm constantly doing audits of it myself of, okay, I'm dropping this thing off because it looked really shiny and cool, and I did not use it the way I thought I would.
Yep. 100%. Always be considerate. Yeah. Always be considerate to that source of truth. I could tell you a lot of horror stories of where somebody turns on an integration and things start flowing in between and it breaks everything. So if you are going that route, like either if it's the person helping you with the tool or if you have somebody who's a professional in that area, always be considerate to that, making sure like we're not just setting and forgetting, because then you could be in more world trouble if you just let them separate. So just something to note on there as well. But yes, there's so much opportunity to now connect some of these bigger players together.
Yeah. And Grant, you can start to beat me up here because, like this whole episode's about scaling a business without a lot of capital, right? And there's going to be people saying, my business does not allow for me to scale this business without, pushing a lot of extra money into it, a lot of extra risk. And one of the areas I think significantly is any business with either very, very expensive equipment or significant amounts of inventory. So I think we got a section here just to kind of talk about that, because there are creative ways to, scale an inventory-based business without just going out and dropping a load of money on product ahead of time. So, one thing to think about here is, depending on what your business is, and I know you have some thoughts on this, Grant, is really effectively testing demand so that inventory can be offloaded quickly, so it's not a huge drag on financial resources.
Yeah, I'll give an example of that. Let's say you've got some type of retail product, right? Let's just say it's a consumer good, could be soaps. It could be, I don't know, candles. It could be, whatever is, right? Something you buy retail. One of the things that I would really be thinking about is kind of testing that proof of concept of what you're saying before you go and buy 10,000 pounds of whatever it is that you need to go buy these products. And I think sometimes folks rush to do that. And I've unfortunately seen many cases where that happens. There are small things that you can do to test proof of concept. And I'll talk more specific to the B2C side here. So like if you have a product or a service like that, and like you're trying to see like, is this something like I should really invest in, or I should go, like some of the best things to do is, give things away at cost. or sell them at cost, or go to your, like, it could be a local farmer's market. It could be, if you're in a bigger city or some cities that have like these pop-up shop concepts, like you don't necessarily need to go all in right away. Like, it's sometimes smart to kind of get your product out there. And the biggest thing I cannot tell you enough times, listen to the feedback that people are giving you about your product, because that is going to inform you. One, is it feasible in the market? Is there a demand for it? The other piece of that is, I'm sure your product or service is going to have a competitor. And so you're always going to be compared to the competitor, especially if you're new to a space and there's some established people in there. So really listen to, are you as different from the competitor as you think? And sometimes some of your preconceived notions of like, well, yeah, this is why we're different, this is why we're better, may not actually be the case of what is making your product sell and be successful. So small iterations of testing before you really go all in can really save you on the cash flow standpoint. And by the way, a lot of times folks will say, I need to do, this big website and this big, social media push and everything else. But then if they didn't have some of these things done up front, then all the messaging, all the things that you're pushing isn't going to resonate with that end customer, and you're not going to move the sales needle as fast, which then of course affects sales and cash flow and all those other things that you were just talking about.
Yeah. And there's clearly a counter argument to the things we're suggesting here, because there have been many of businesses that have boomed and become successful off of somebody taking a big risk and shelling out a lot of money to throw into a product and just trusted their gut that it was going to sell great afterwards. But I'm just not a huge advocate of that. I come from the idea of just trying to like hustle your way through these things and finding the way to get the capital to launch and know that the sales are going to convert really fast. So I think I love all the creative ideas that you see with folks really testing demand, whether that's through pre-sales, through crowdfunding of some sorts. These are the things where you're raising the cash flow needed to stock up on inventory from the existing customer base by doing some kind of guerrilla marketing actions to get hype surrounded by the product and get orders in ahead of time. I think there are a ton of examples of people doing incredibly well with that, and it essentially funds the acquisition, and you're not sitting in a huge cash hole, and also that there's demand. I've seen some stuff, not coming from somebody who's not a marketer, but like there's a lot of strategy in retail sales about stuff selling out. I've seen a lot of talk about, like even like something simple like t-shirts or like designer brands, like the keeping too much inventory on hand was almost a problem for demand. So like they'll let it, sell out and reissue to keep that demand rolling, which I'm like, well, that's not too bad from a cash flow standpoint. The other thing I wanted to leave in here that I find really, really helpful for anybody working in high inventory businesses is really keeping your SKUs, or like the total number of products you have and varieties, as limited as possible. Because that the more limited your SKU count is, the less variety and volume of products you're going to have to buy, and less stock you're going to sit on all the time. So, I think it takes a ton of emphasis to be like, okay, yeah, I would love to have this product in orange, white, blue, green, yellow, magenta, whatever it is. But if magenta doesn't really sell, do you really want to stock it? Maybe you should have black, white, and gray. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just really tightening that down really helps from a capital resource standpoint. I know that's challenging, and I might be completely talking out of turn here coming from the accounting side, because there's a lot of theory to marketing that I don't know, but I'm just saying when you're taking a step down that road of a big volume of inventory, you got to have the pocketbook for it.
Yeah, no. And I think it does really also just depend on, what it is that you're selling. Do you have a reputation already of selling maybe another product or service that you've already got a little bit of credibility to? And so you're able to take maybe a bigger risk or difference. Like there's just a lot of variables that go in that. But like, I think what we're saying is, make sure you have a little, don't just jump. We see a lot of people who jump sometimes and they don't have a parachute whatsoever, and they're really open to, to fly. And so anyway, if you're one of those people who are maybe a little bit more risk adverse, or who maybe are not quite as sure about a new concept or product, like there are definitely numerous different ways to test and iterate.
Yeah. And let's go ahead and jump to, we're kind of out of order here, but there's a topic we want to talk about, just kind of investing in the business when the like demand track record has been proven, right? And we talked a little bit about inventory heavy stuff, but I also want to talk about from other types of businesses that don't have inventory, but find themselves needing to come up with significant amounts of capital for jobs, whether it's from labor or a material standpoint. There are a couple little hacks here you can use to help fund that. And one of those is how you invoice your customers. If you can get your reputation at a point where you've built a level of trust that you can invoice up front, that's huge, right? Because you're funding essentially the services or materials that you're going to, ultimately perform. And I'll heavily advise, if you have sunk cost in materials, especially if you're somebody who is putting in a bunch of money into materials for a sale, you got to have an ironclad contract or agreement with somebody, and you also should be looking for a deposit up front. Those are things that can get really out of hand really fast, especially if you're into anything custom. You could be sitting on all this material and have a deal fall apart and you don't know what to do with it. So I think that was an area that's, worth talking about. And I know that that's not perfectly in line with, demand being proven. But what I'm trying to explain is that you should be trying to use the cash flow from your business to generate the future growth rather than kind of upfronting it. So even when you're talking like, if you're this business that has a very expensive piece of equipment, say you're an excavating company and excavators cost a lot of money, right? Or if you're a bakery and you need this big baking oven, the mindset coming into this should be whatever you're doing to make the product or deliver the service now with what you have should be paying for that next upgrade. And you should be doing an ROI calculation on why that upgrade matters, how much more money it's going to make you or how much time it's going to save you. And you use the cash flow from the business to help fund that.
Yeah.
I know it's a mouthful.
For sure. No, for sure. And I think, we're talking a lot about capital equipment expenditures. We've talked some now about, what you can market and what you can do to prove your concepts out and, how to push things and look at demand and be smart about investing in inventory. But one of the last things we want to talk a little bit about is that big expenditure item that everybody has, which is called people. And so, Tyler, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this, especially with your experience on the operations side of the coin. Just adding people doesn't necessarily add profit and revenue, and so let's talk a little bit about how we can be lean with people and where there are opportunities to invest and what to do there.
Yeah, I think at this stage for businesses, and the ones we're talking about, trying to the existing business trying to really scale up, is that a lot of times there's just an absolute like rat's nest of craziness going on in day-to-day operations. Like we're using this system and then Betty's piece of paper, then John's got the way he does it over here. And it's just like outside 1,000-foot down looking in, it's just like operating in chaos. Like it's working, but it's really relying on a few of these people who have just very either archaic systems or intricate systems that they only know. So it almost feels like everybody's maxed out all the time. And we need to hire another person just to manage this email inbox or hire another person just to push this thing through to the next stage. And a lot of times people just keep doing the hiring cycle as everyone feels like I'm too busy, I can't handle everything, boom, hire another person. And it can get expensive really fast. And I think, coming off our episode with Forrest, with the fractional chief operating officers, things, there should be an opportunity for you to really look inside of what your operation looks like. And like what we're suggesting here is having the mindset of lean operations. And a lot of this ties back to that main operating system you're using before, like Google, or that, what Forrest talked about in that episode, having an actual like named operating system like EOS. The tool and the actual system that you run, I think, is really important, and you should really be doing almost an audit of sorts of how the business functions from start to finish, how customers come in and out of the business, how money comes in and out of the business, how the service or product's delivered, because there's just a lot of mess in there, and there's a lot of things you can do and leverage to simplify that and make it easier. I think, you'd be surprised how many times if you really sat down and did an SOP or standard operating procedure for whatever's going on inside your business and documented it and said, these are the tools that we're using. And you really tried to keep it as simple as you could, like Forrest said, knock out 80% of it. You might not need to hire somebody.
Mm-hmm. And I think an exercise that I've done myself, and I've told others to do this as well. And I can't remember if I mentioned this on the podcast before or not. If for a week you wrote down every day, almost did like a diary of what you did every day. Like write down like, these are the things I spent my time on today. And you kind of do that day by day for you. Some people can literally do this in a week. Do it every day for a week. Go back and look at the different things that you wrote down and how long you spent doing them. I bet you are doing a lot of things that either can be automated or delegated. And that's one of the things where we see a lot of people get really stuck. And as somebody like me who I like to have kind of my hands in everything, that's just my personality. Sometimes delegation can be difficult. And so really when you start to put kind of dollars and cents to your time and the efforts that you're putting in there, or where there might be headspace issues of like, well, I spent so much time in certain things, I couldn't be as effective in other things. You really start to see those dollars add up. And that is regardless of like, that's any industry across the board. But if you really took time to do that, that's a kind of a simple exercise. Like just do that for a week. If you feel like you're kind of stuck in the weeds, like, and then look at that list and go, I probably should move these things off, and I really should only be concentrating on these things.
Yeah, there are so many different segments of your business. I think you should really analyze and critique because you may just need to operate differently too. Like if you're focused on scaling a business in a lean way, you'll find some processes that you have that take somebody a lot of time because it's complicated and this system doesn't talk to this system or something's going on. And what I'm suggesting here is looking at that and going, well, maybe we should do it differently. Even if that means the deliverable to our customers different, because you're going to sit here and do kind of a pros cons thing, right? A good example is, you can look at a situation where, let's say it's billing and you're really having a hard time chasing down accounts receivable. Well, maybe you should look at your arrangements on how you're doing billing. Like, do you have an ironclad, contractor agreement with your customers? Does it say that you're going to do this at this point in time? Well, do it. If that means that you stop service or that, there's interest added, or like sometimes there's these procedures no one's doing and it lets the business kind of get out of hand. And those things are in those agreements for a reason because it incentivizes people to get paid. Things like kind of handling phone calls coming in, like inbound leads. A lot of work has been done with products that let you set up forms that people can go to, and that whole process can be automated from there.
Or even chatbots, yeah.
Yeah, so like an example of what I use, if you go out my website and it says contact us, you click it, it drops you into a form. I start doing all this vetting of the contact us form, right? It says, gets your name, gets your email address, gets your phone number, gets, details about your business. It gets likes and dislikes and experiences you've had before. Like I get this full setup of, what the profile of the customer would be. And that weeds out a ton of just like spam, because I'm sure you get a lot of spam or just low qualified leads, right? So you can vet it out. Then you can see if it's ready for a call, and then you can do automated responses so they know that they got it. There's just so many things you can do. And then coming back to a lot of this can be done through that main like Google account too. So, we can't get over them all on this call, and this is sometimes probably why it's worth getting a little bit of help from an operations standpoint. But there's probably a dozen different things just like this in your business where you could one by one go through and think, if we want to stay lean and we want to scale this thing and be as profitable as possible, let's change how the business is operating to make these things operate in a more automated way so we don't just have to keep hiring people to kind of fill this void of all this technical mess.
Yeah. For sure. And I mean, we could go, Tyler and I could go on and on and on and on and on about some of these different things that we're seeing, things that we're learning currently. But I think, as a listener today, hopefully you're able to come away with, a couple different areas of focus, right? Whether it was looking at your tools, looking at labor, looking at capital overhead, looking at, how you're spending on marketing and make sure product's ready. So Tyler, as we kind of wrap things up, I mean, what are some things that you're hoping that, obviously our listeners are able to take away from this today?
Yeah, the big one, I mean, clearly there's a theme for this, it's all about spending money, right? And when you hit a certain stage in business, the floodgates can just really open in terms of how expensive things are, whether it's tools, whether it's equipment, whether it's people. And it gets really easy to say yes, 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 yes. And the next thing you know, your margins have eroded or you've bloated this thing up and you're sitting there going, I used to be very profitable before. And what happened? And it does take some gut and some discipline to stay persistent on trying to operate lean, trying to say, we're not using junk. We're not under hiring and making people pull their hair out, but like everything's got to have an ROI. What is the ROI on these investments? Where is it making us better? We've had a ton of episodes about businesses that grow their revenue and their expenses at the same time, the same amount. It's like, what does that do? Unless you're Amazon and you're trying to bump up your stock value, it's probably not you. You want to make investments and see more profit. And this is what I think it takes, is to be kind of hypercritical of those big expenditures and make sure there's no ROI there.
Yep, for sure. Well, we covered a whole lot of things today. We hope that, like we said, you're able to come away with a lot of awesome takeaways. And any questions on any stuff, reach out, connect with us, add your comments into the section on YouTube, and we're happy to answer them or connect you with somebody else who might be able to answer them as well. So as always, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Thanks again for joining us today on the Next Gen Strategies podcast.
Be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you really enjoyed it, give us a share on any of your favorite social media channels.
And don't forget to leave us a review.